Okay, everybody, good morning. As good as you can make it after a game like that, after a week one performance like that. I know I'm not taking too much good after a season opener, a home opener, where your team just can't get out of its own way and can't beat a team that, if we're being perfectly honest, also kind of can't get out of their own way. So we're still in our feelings right now, I think. There's the 48-hour rule. We need to let ourselves feel all the feelings right now so that by tomorrow afternoon, we can get past it and start thinking about the next game because whether we're ready or not, this next game is coming up and the urgency to find a way to get a win is higher than it's been in a while because I've said it a couple times. The schedule this year for the Seahawks is pretty easy, but the season can still spin out of control very easily before you even get to the bye week. So at some point, you actually have to go win some games. But I want to talk about the worst part of yesterday's game a little bit because I I don't think this can be understated right now, and I have to relate it back to what happened during the Seahawks offseason a little bit because this was something that I protested against. This is something that I didn't agree with. And already after week one, we've seen the downside of this starting to play out. So, week one of the NFL season isn't over yet. We have a game tonight, but we do have a pretty good set of data from most of the teams in the league. Like there isn't that much left that we need to find out. So tonight, whatever happens, happens. Maybe tonight changes some things a little bit, but we have offensive data from almost every week one game, and I wanted to see where we stood because one thing that a few people pointed out was this was not a very good week for offensive football. None of the teams looked particularly good offensively outside of maybe three or four. Now, last night, the Sunday night game was about as good as it gets offensively, so that kind of reset the conversation a little bit. But there was definitely a sense that the offenses were not off to a good start for 2025. And you look at the numbers, that does kind of bear out, even with what happened last night. Like last night really kind of saved it. Only four teams went over 400 yards of total offense yesterday, right? That's usually it feels like you see a little bit more than that. It feels like it wasn't that long ago where 400 yards of offense was almost the median. Like you would see close to half the teams, or at least 10 teams on any given week, get over 400 yards of offense. But you can see that before last night's game, there were only two of them. You had Washington and you had Indianapolis. And both of those teams got to 400 yards because, quite frankly, the opposing offense they played was so bad that the opposing defense wore out. So even that's kind of like, okay, I mean, you got over 400 yards, and in a week like this, that's great. But there's definitely a part of it that's like, well, how much of that was your offense being excellent, and how much of it was your opposing offense just not doing nothing? Before I go any further into this, I want to tell you a little bit about my friends over at Sleeper. Have you heard about the Sleeper app? It is the best way to experience and connect over sports together with other users. It's a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. Go download the app now. You can celebrate and chat on games in real time with others. You can get the fastest scores, news, and alerts, all that right at your fingertips. And of course, you can play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So you can enjoy sports the way they were meant to be, together. Download the number one sports app today. And when you go, use promo code SBN, that is SBN, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. So check out Sleeper today. Don't forget promo code SBN. And you look at it by points, it's a little bit better. You did have some pretty high scoring teams this week. Again, the Bills and the Ravens really kind of saved the day. Both of those offenses just went off, and it wasn't because the opposing offense was atrocious, not even close, because they were playing each other, right? But you did have some other pretty good scoring games. You did have the Steelers, you did have the Jets, and again, that was another game where you had the two teams playing each other. You had the Colts obviously went off, although that is an example of what I was just talking about, with some teams just quite simply not showing up with their offense and allowing the other offense to just lean on them. But even with this, I want to make it clear where the Seahawks stand. I don't think I need to spell out exactly how bad the offense was, but let's compare it to the rest of the league for this last week. So total yards, you got to scroll all the way to the bottom. The Seattle Seahawks came in 29th with 230 yards. They had fewer yards than the New York Giants. They had fewer yards than the Detroit Lions. And those were two teams that were very much publicized for incompetent offensive performances this week. Two teams that really couldn't get out of their own way in terms of moving the ball. And you're behind both of them. There are only three teams the Seahawks outgained this week. You had the Miami Dolphins, who clearly are dysfunctional beyond belief right now. Like, I don't think I need to spell that one out. That is as bad as it gets for a football team. You have the Cincinnati Bengals, who always start the year sleepwalking. Somehow they still win that game, but their offense is notorious for starting the seasons poorly, and they did it again. And of course, the Tennessee Titans, who were probably the worst offensive team this week, who are starting a rookie quarterback in his first ever NFL start against maybe the best defense in football in Denver. So it's a bad group to be a part of, people. It's a bad group. Like, even some of these teams that are a little more respectable, that you were still well behind, like Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield looked really, really off for most of that game. I watched a decent chunk of that game. Baker just couldn't hit anything until a couple of big moments at the end there. It felt like they're still outgaining you big. You got Houston with all the offensive line problems they're having, that's just going to make life really hard for that team. Like, even they were able to significantly outgain you. So even in a week where offensive performance and offensive production was down, like it's pretty rough. It's especially bad here in Seattle. And then you go to points, you look at total points, Seattle does slightly better. Their 13 points are actually not even bottom 5. In fact, they're tied with a bunch of other teams for, like, what, 23rd approximately? But look at the teams that are behind them. Again, you have the Titans, who I already mentioned. You got the Panthers, who I don't expect to be any good this year. You've got Houston, who we just talked about. You got Miami, we just talked about then. And bringing up the rear, the Giants, who have a washed-up quarterback and a coaching staff that is going to almost certainly get fired before this season is over. So that's the level of incompetency we saw from the offense this week. And I don't know what the Niners defense is going to be this year, but I seriously doubt it's going to be one of the best defenses in the league. I think Robert Saleh is a good coach, so I think they might be all right. I'm not here to say that they're going to be one of the worst defenses, but that is not a defense that you should be having one of the league worst performances against. It's just not. That's not a team that you should be putting up 13 points and 230 yards against. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, in particular, the rushing offense. And I know this is volume, and I know volume is a little bit of a dicey thing to look at, but how is this Seahawks team, the way they've been built, the way we've discussed them in the offseason, the way they've been talked about, in the bottom half of the league in rushing yards for week 1? With all the talk that we had about a smash mouth run first offense, how we were going to feature running backs, how we were going to get back to basics up front, how Kubiak was going to come in and do this and that. How are we not even, like, what is this, about 20th in the league in rushing yards? in a game where you were never out of it. You never were playing from behind in this game until the very end. You actually were playing with a lead for a vast majority of the game. It wasn't a big lead, but you were playing from a pretty good position of power. You were never behind by more than one possession, and yet you still can't run the ball on a team that has a bunch of Jags and veterans and rookies in the interior of the defense. Like, I'm sorry, but that is about as bad a start as it gets. There are other teams that maybe did a little bit worse, but at least I can look at it and think to myself, well, at least they're playing teams that I think are going to be good defensively. At least they're playing defenses where I can kind of understand the lack of production. Now, of course, the passing offense, I don't think I need to even really look at that. Of course, our passing offense was pretty pathetic. What was one of the worst in the league. Look at who we're down there with. We're down there with Philadelphia. They have a quarterback who can't complete intermediate passes at all. You've got teams like the Dolphins, who we talked about, the Panthers, the Cardinals, who are a run-first team, the Bengals, who no-show Week 1 games, the Titans can bring up the rear. What are we doing in the same area as these teams, right? You've got Houston with their completely busted offensive line. You've got the Giants with a washed-up quarterback and basically a non-functional passing attack, missing their starting left tackle, not much protection for said washed-up quarterback, and they're still having a more effective and more, I don't know if I'd call it more efficient, but you could argue more efficient passing attack than these Seahawks. And I look at all these numbers, and I know it's just one game, but it makes me think about the offseason that we just had, and I wonder if this was the right approach. And you guys know I've been wondering about it for a while now. I got to bring back the conversation. This offseason, the Seahawks knew they were going to have to move some stuff around offensively. We needed to move on from Grubb. That was very obviously a requirement. Grubb had to go, so that was a no-brainer. And we were going to have to move off of Lockett because he was old and making too much money. Had to do something different there. I understand that. I get it. And there were some decisions that needed to be made up front with the interior offensive line. You couldn't bring back all the same players. So there was going to be some stuff you had to change, but pretty much every team has to make some changes in the offseason on at least on one side of the ball. So I'm looking at the season as it was setting up back when the schedule came out. Although really, we've known who all of our opponents were going to be as soon as the season ended. So the schedule just kind of laid out a roadmap, but we knew who all the opponents were way back in February, way back in January, actually. So you're looking at that schedule and you should be thinking, hey, this is a schedule that sets up favorably for us. We should be able to have a really good season, even if we're not necessarily the best team in the world. Is it really a good idea to look at that schedule and say, let's just completely blow up the offense and start from zero? Because that's basically what we did. We decided, on top of everything I just said, we're trading our quarterback, we're trading our ex-receiver, we're going to be basically swapping out all the parts up front, right? Like I said, you keep the tackles, but Bradford, I guess he comes back from last year, but Bradford didn't play every game last year, right? Sorry, guys, kind of losing my voice. Yesterday was a lose your voice kind of day for me. I think you guys, if you know, you know. But do you see what I'm getting at here? You're already making some required changes to the offense, but you're looking at a season where things set up pretty decently for you schedule-wise. Was it really a good idea to go nuclear on the offense and just completely reset at pretty much every level? Like, you bring back JSN, you're bringing back Cross and Lucas, who, by the way, didn't even play half the season last year. But other than that, you're basically taking a torch to everything on the offense. You're swapping out tight ends pretty significantly. AJ Barner goes from, tight end 3 last year to tight end 1. You're bringing in Arroyo. You're completely reworking so much stuff on this offense. Was it really a good idea to do that before a season where things seem set up for you to compete? Because there was a baseline level of competency this offense could have had if you had kept some of the parts. Even with the players being flawed, at least there was comfort there. Like, yesterday, this offense looked completely out of sorts for most of that game. They had multiple drives in this game where they went 3 and out with negative yards. I think they had 3 drives where their offense mustered negative yardage and they punted. They ran like 3 or 4 screen passes in this game, and on every one of them, they look like they've never practiced that play before, and it looked like the 49ers were in the huddle with them, and they knew what the play was exactly before they even ran it. These are not things that you see from most other teams in the NFL, and even with the new offense, even with some of the new offensive line pieces that would have been required, even with another receiver to replace Lockett, even with another receiver, or excuse me, another tight end to replace Fant, you probably could have mustered competency to the point where you're not even that worried about what happens at the very end of the game there. Like, you're probably not in the position where you even need that last minute drive because there's a degree of competency that allows you to survive these early week problems. Because the problems were going to be there no matter what, but if you had kept some continuity from last year or the previous few years, if you want to look at it that way, guys who knew each other, guys who knew how each other worked, guys who had some level of comfort with each other, this wouldn't happen, I don't think. I don't think you'd be going par for par with the worst offenses in the league against a Niners defense that I think the Niners defense probably played a little bit better than we expected, but you can't tell me that Niners defense is going to be one of the best in football. You can't tell me that that's a team that's going to show up on the road every week and just dominate and hold opposing teams to under 250 yards and 13 points. They're not going to be like that. So I got to go back to it. And I know that people don't want to start their week off with this conversation because for a lot of people it's gotten old. But if this is a rebuilding year, where you just don't care about wins or losses and you're thinking about next year already, then why did you go out and spend all that money on veteran players like Sam Darnold, like Cooper Kupp, like DeMarcus Lawrence? And if this is a year where you're going for it, then why did you completely torch the offense and open yourself up to have a game this bad in week 1 at home against, again, I'm going to say it, a defense that has weak spots that a good offense or a decent offense can take advantage of and get you off to an 0-1 start? Because whatever we can say about the defense, yesterday was about the offense, and a competent offense, I think, wins that game pretty rudimentarily. All right, let me know what you guys think, although I know you all are sick of this conversation. See you guys later. Go Hawks.